Donald Trump is actively working to end the war in Ukraine as the recent 30-day partial ceasefire has just ended and Russia resumed attack on Ukraine. Rubio said the US wants a full ceasefire within weeks, not months. America is prepared to offer significant concessions to Russia to secure a peace deal. Reports suggest that US may cease sanctions on Russia if a lasting ceasefire is achieved. Ukraine's aspiration to join NATO would also be off the table. The US may also recognize Russia's control of Crimea as part of the peace deal. Crimea was annexed by Russia in 2014, but the international community has not recognized it. The US appears to be very desperate to secure a Ukraine peace deal so that he can focus its energy and resources on China, because fighting both China and Russia simultaneously is considered highly risky. Secretary of State Marco Rubio warned that US may move on from its peace efforts if no quick progress. It is unclear what he means by move on. Does it mean to end only the mediation effort, or is US going to also halt the military aid to Ukraine? Let's assume if Russia rejects the peace deal and the US continues the military aid to Ukraine afterwards, this is going to cause US to fight a two-front war. One is military conflict with Russia, two is an economic and trade conflict with China. Fighting a two-front war is not ideal for US. Let's say if Putin rejects the peace deal and US halts the military aid to Ukraine as a result, that would likely give Putin a strategic win because Russia would face a lot less resistance moving forward. Ending the support to Ukraine would also strain US-Europe relation. It may be seen as Europe abandoning its European allies. In conclusion, if Russia refuses a ceasefire, it would create major challenges for US. It would strain US-Europe relationships, undermine the Western unity, and as a result, it would also accelerate the de-dollarization. If China-Russia so-called no-limit cooperation is genuine, the two countries should be seen as a unified bloc. In such case, there is very little incentive for Putin to accept a peace deal. So a strong US-Europe relationship is crucial amid escalating US-China trade war tension. The worst outcome for US is to have China and European Union join forces to target US export as a retaliation, especially the American services sector. It's a key export surplus sector for US. Since April 2nd, the Liberation Day, China and European Union has held multiple talks. European Union is deeply affected by Ukrainian war, and the Trump's failure to secure a peace is already straining the relationship. In contrast, China may be taking this as an opportunity to offer some sort of its own version of security guarantee, or even push for its own version of the peace deal. Because the aggressor is Russia, Russia listens to China. And Trump's talk of annexing Greenland, a Danish territory, is further damaging the relationship between US and Europe. Looking at this on a big picture, while Russia is threatening European borders, instead of helping, the US is also trying to annex a part of Europe. So also Trump has repeatedly mentioned the possibility of having a third presidential term. Whether it's joking or not joking, the comments suggest weak commitment to democratic norms. It may be seen as a misalignment with European Union's core democratic values. It further strains the US-Europe relationship. The ongoing US-China trade war is worsening Wall Street's S&P 500 US market outlook. Major Wall Street banks has lowered their S&P 500 year-end target. The red dot in the chart shows the price target collected mid-January 2025. The blue dot is the latest revision. So nearly all banks on Wall Street has lowered their year-end target. However, in a recent interview, Tom Lee argued US exceptionalism isn't over. Despite a weaker dollar and a higher treasury yield, he believes that the US still have the world's best companies and that won't change.
I think that is the narrative at the moment, that U.S. exceptionalism's over and people are selling treasuries and dollars to buy other assets. But I'm not in that camp that it's sustainable, because unless weaker dollar and higher yields suddenly makes the best companies in the world outside the U.S., the best and the most important companies in the world are American companies. They've produced the best shareholder returns. And, if you look at the S&P, 40% of the returns of the S&P come from new companies every 10 years. Is there going to be suddenly the best new company coming out of Europe instead of the U.S. because of the dollar? And I doubt it. And I think U.S. companies are going to adapt.
He is pretty much saying fundamentally nothing has changed. These market shifts will sort themselves out. I think the current market moves, including weaker dollar, weaker equity, and higher yields, stem from the expectation of lower U.S. deficit in the future. A lower deficit, or a lower expected deficit, is leading to a capital outflow. If this is such a risky game to play, why does Trump play this game? Trump's aggressive tariff strategy may be a response to rising de-dollarization threat. It makes sense that under the gold standard, where US dollar used to be pegged to physical gold, US would want to achieve a trade surplus because that would be beneficial. But today, without the gold standard, the US can run trade deficit and just print money without any problem. So the global acceptance of dollar is because of the trust and faith in the United States government and not the intrinsic value of the currency. But the issue right now is that the de-dollarization is becoming more and more visible. Countries like China are diverting the export earnings from US asset to physical gold. This breaks the usual dollar recycle loop, where a country export to US, they make US dollar, the dollar gets fully reinvested in US assets. So China now holds 2,280 tons of gold, nearly 30% of the US gold reserve, challenging the dollar dependence. It has been observed that countries with strong manufacturing has greater global influence. This gives the country a great leverage on the international stage. So Trump is aiming to rebuild US manufacturing to regain strategic leverage and defend the dollar's reserve currency status. China is facing deflation and needs to keep the export volume high. US tariff wall will push China to reroute its export to lower tariff market such as Europe. To stay competitive, China is weakening yuan. Right now the exchange rate is 8.3 yuan to euro. It's a 2020 level. This is making Chinese export a lot cheaper to the European market. So Europe will see a surge of low-cost Chinese goods, increasing the deflationary pressure. This influx of cheap Chinese good, will hurt European manufacturing and undercutting the local prices. While some Chinese goods may be rerouted back into US, but it's going to be limited because the US is reshoring manufacturing and is becoming more self-sufficient. A lower US demand for foreign good means there will be less opportunity for rerouting, and there will be a global oversupply of Chinese goods. As a result, China will export its deflation to the world, especially Europe. Thank you. Please like and subscribe.